Welcome once again to the Biz Breaks Podcast. I am your host, Kevin the Credit Crusher, along with my host and co-host, the financial expert, Nykeia Neal. And today we have a special guest on the show, Deborah Coleman, who has a rich history in both corporate America and entrepreneurship in a unique way, a unique approach to entrepreneurship. So we're going to get into a full conversation about that. As you know, on the Biz Breaks podcast, every Wednesday at 1 p.m., we have real talk with real entrepreneurs. And today promises to be a very intriguing, interesting, and entertaining conversation. So welcome, Deborah Coleman, to the Biz Breaks podcast.
Thank you.
That's my clap. So we're going to jump right in here. Tell us your history through corporate America into where you are or where you were in entrepreneurship.
Okay. So I had an accidental career. I will start with that. I went to college to be a writer. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And when I finished college, I went down to Houston to take a job as a public information officer for none other than Barbara Jordan, who was at the time in the Texas Senate. And those of you who are younger than I may not even know who that was, but she was a very, very prominent African-American woman in Texas at a time when Black women were not being admitted into the higher echelons of government, but she was a force. Anyway, I was excited about going to work for her. I interviewed, I got the job on a Friday. I showed up for work on Monday and they told me that they had an emergency budget meeting and that the appropriation for my job had been cut. So therefore I was out the job hired and fired like all in the same weekend, right? Yes. And I was devastated, of course, because that was like the most amazing opportunity that one could have coming directly out of college. However, because they felt badly about having, done that, they had already arranged for me to interview for a job with, of all people, Southwestern Bell. Now, never in my wildest dreams did it even occur to me that I might go to work for a giant monopoly, which is what the Bell system was at the time. And I had really no idea of what that was going to be. Didn't know what job I was going to interview for. Just go over here. I needed a job, right? I needed a job, so I didn't argue too much. Anyway, they told me to go over and interview with Southwestern Bell, and I interviewed like for all day long. It was just a long interview day, and at the end of which they told me that I had been hired and I was going to be a public telephone representative. And again, those of you who are in your generation may not remember when there were payphones, right? That were on corners. You remember payphones? You don't remember payphones. Okay.
I absolutely remember payphones.
All right. Well,
and I remember when they cost a dime. So
exactly, right? So they may have been probably a part of your generation. And if you were in college at the time, there were payphones in the dorm. And the thing about them is the kids all knew how to jerry rig the phones. So we were always having to go on campus.
One of my entrepreneurial endeavors on the illegal side, but entrepreneurial.
Be careful, right?
Indeed.
Be careful what you say.
Statute of limitations is over, so
okay, all right. Well, but yeah, that was one of the college campuses were always a challenge because they could find the most creative ways of being able to use the phone without putting coins in that I have ever seen ever. So that was interesting. But anyway, long and short of it was I sort of fell into the Bell system machine, I call it, because it was a really well-oiled machine at the time. There were 23 operating companies that reported up to AT&T that owned all those operating companies, giant monopoly. And how I got into a career with them was that sometime during my tenure, AT&T got sued for discrimination. And they in the settlement with the Justice Department, they were required to not only hire additional minorities into the jobs, but also to create a pipeline for moving them into the upper echelons of the corporation. Yeah,
man, about that,
right? So I'll start to say that my corporate career was accidental and it was timely. Sometimes being in the right place at the right time is the way you get ahead. I will tell you that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a beneficiary of a set of circumstances that moved me into, I was already in, but, of course, they didn't just give you the job. I had to go through a number of other assessments to determine if I was management material.
Mm-hmm.
And then they put me in this program that was a program that was designed to prepare me to take over an executive position in the executive ranks of the corporation. And so that's what I did. So about every 18 months, they gave me a job in a different department, and I had to perform the job. I had to succeed in it. And succeeding meaning you have all these measurements that you have to meet, all these, KPIs as they call them. And if you did, then you were assigned to your next job. Sometimes it was lateral, sometimes it was a promotion. But through that process, I managed to work my way up to vice president and general manager of one of the AT&T divisions, business units of one of AT&T's business units. And so I learned a lot of things, right? Because I did a lot of jobs.
For one of the biggest companies in America ever.
Right. And so the business unit that I worked for was the small business division, and this relates to entrepreneurship. It was a small business division, which was a creation that happened after AT&T was divested. They had to go through and sell off all of their operating companies because that was also a lawsuit, antitrust suit. And after they divested, they restructured everything a lot. They restructured often. But there was an issue with AT&T because of its size of dealing with small business customers. And the small business customers kept saying, AT&T has no understanding of what it's like to be a small business. And therefore, they're trying to create products and services that fit if you are a big multinational or if you are a big government entity. But those of us who are sole proprietors or mom and pop shops, you guys are trying to sell us stuff that we can't afford, that has features that we don't need,
right?
Just like we were one of the big guys. And so, and the thing about the small business market was, this is really strange, right? The big companies the big companies provided about 20% of the revenue of the corporation, believe it or not, and small business provided 80% because there were so many of them, right? Right. And so it was volume in the small end, and the large companies only bought stuff every 5 or 6 years. They weren't turning over their systems often. That's why they weren't generating the kind of income that small business was.
So to understand what you're saying, AT&T was focusing on the General Motors of the world, but the small businesses were really what was driving revenue, right? So,
Exactly.
But they gave preferential treatment to the General Motors, and the small business,
No, it wasn't preferential treatment. I don't want to misstate that. It was not preferential treatment. It was, if you think about it, if you are a large multi-billion-dollar company, you think the way a large multi-billion-dollar company thinks, right? And until there was competition, until AT&T was divested of its operating companies, it just simply couldn't see what it was doing. It's like the forest for the trees, right? You're in it. This is the way the world looks, right? That's what it looked like. And until it got broken up and broken into smaller pieces, there was no way for them to understand that they had different markets, and the different markets needed different things. And so they weren't serving the full spectrum of the market. And they hadn't done the analysis until after divestiture to realize that a lot of their revenue was coming from this lower end of the market, as they called it. So it wasn't deliberate. It wasn't that they focused on it. It's just that was the way business worked at the time. Their business worked at the time.
Got you. And so you're working in this major conglomerate, right? That is an international company, by the way, right? And
yes,
and
it's global, yeah.
It's global, right? And you make your way up to a pretty high level, right?
Oops. I'm sorry, you broke up for a minute.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So you made it to a pretty high level in this global company. Yeah.
Yes. And again, I need to say this to people, is it was a combination of preparation and, Oprah says it's preparation and opportunity coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Because I won't say nobody, if you were Black in a corporation at that point in time, nobody gave you anything, right? Nobody made it their point to make your life easy and, even though you're in this program, you're constantly being challenged to prove that you're good enough to be here. Mm-hmm. And there were plenty of people who wanted to prove that it was a mistake. Mm-hmm. To hire minorities, because minorities would never be able to perform at the level that other people did. And people went about their business to try to, prove themselves right. Mm. So while it was a great opportunity, and, but this is what I would tell people about that. The great, iron is forged in fire, right? Steel is forged in fire. And when you are challenged in the way that environment challenges you, you either cave or you rise to the top, right? You rise to the top because you are constantly having to do things better, right? You have to, you would hate that it wouldn't this way, but you have to hang in there and you have to prove yourself. You have to do the job well enough, better than your peers, so that people will continue to, give you more opportunities. And the other thing that I felt, being a Black and female, which was a real small minority of people, mm-hmm. was that I was also carrying the opportunity for other Black women on my shoulders.
Right.
And that was a motivator for me. A lot of this wasn't about what the white people were doing. It was about, there are, Black women who won't get an opportunity to move up if I fail at what I'm doing. So I felt that very acutely as I was going up the ladder.
So you develop a bunch of skills because you move through many different departments, many different job functions. So talk about some of the skills that you picked up along the way.
Okay. So like I said, they rotated us through a lot of things. And so the formula that they used, which I thought was brilliant, in hindsight, I think it was brilliant, was they would put you in an assignment and you learned it, you did it, and then you taught it. Mm-hmm. And only when you got to the level where you could teach it, did they get that you knew what you were talking about.
Understand it.
Right.
That's how you know you're a master, right?
That's mastery, right? When you could teach it to other people. And so I spent 7 years in different sales jobs, starting at the bottom, right? Where I had a ton load of small accounts and working my way up to an account executive, which was a person who had I had major business accounts then. I was in the banking industry, so I had a lot of the big banks. Now, and so this is how I'm going to say this cumulative knowledge. Because my client base was banks, the bankers taught me a lot about money, right? Because because I would go to their conferences and I would talk to them when I was the way that we sold at AT&T was what they call consultative selling. So I had to develop consulting skills. I had to develop selling skills, and we were assigned to an industry. So I had to learn the industry. So I learned about banking and finance from banking and finance people. Because as I learned about their businesses, it was in learning about their businesses that I could match the product that I was selling to the needs that they had in their business. But it required me to spend a lot of time sort of understanding how their business worked, and how all of the various components of their business worked together and how they had to communicate together. So that was tremendous for learning the foundations of how businesses business departments are interdependent, and how they need to work together. So I learned a lot about that in sales, and I learned a lot about finance and banking and money in sales. And then I was moved over to the service part of the business, and I had a bunch of jobs, right? Different jobs there. And so that was about customer service. That was the part of the business that, they'd already bought the product, and now we had to keep it running for them. And so learning to listen to people, listen through kind of sometimes really angry people, or and being able to figure out how to provide the service that they were asking for. So I learned a lot about customer service and serving customers in that part of the business. And about the time that I got into middle management, there was another restructure, and I was sent to a business unit that was new called the Small Business Division. And that was dedicated to finding out the needs of small businesses from, what we used to call mom and pop, the corner store, all the way up to companies that had about 100, 150 employees. That was kind of the market range that we had. And so that's where I learned about entrepreneurs. That's where I learned about people who have few resources and need to figure out how to make those resources stretch, and how to, I think the other big thing was how to tailor how to tailor what I had available to what it was that they needed. So in some cases, if they couldn't afford, if they couldn't afford the product that the product price points that we had, I learned we had to work out financing for them, right? We you know what I mean? And so really understanding the mindset of small business and the problems that small businesses have that larger businesses, because they're better resourced, didn't have, was the beginning of my understanding sort of all of the things that you need to know to be a small business person. So that, I think, so my corporate career, while it might have seemed like my knowledge base would have been all about giant corporations, the fact of the matter is working with the small business customers was invaluable in my second career in the once I left the company.
So we've talked offline. I'm sorry, Nykeia, did I cut you off? Were you about to say something? All right. So we've talked offline about a number of things in your career. And you talked about something. You talk about something often that I think a lot of people may not understand. And so there are two types of selling, but you introduced a third. So most people talk about transactional selling and relational selling, but you talk about this thing that's sort of a hybrid called consultative selling. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, consultative selling. So it's really interesting is that I am a terrible salesperson, like a transactional salesperson.
Yes,
I'm not good at that. You know what I mean? I'm better at relational selling. But so here's what consultative selling is. It's a combination of a consultant and a salesperson. So what a consultant does, a good consultant is a really good listener. That's like the most important thing. And so my training as a consultative salesperson was to not go into a business and try to sell them anything. It was to go into the business and listen to what the business people were dealing with, their issues, their problems, their roadblocks, the places where, and I was really listening for carefully the places where there were communications problems, where they weren't able to get information from one area of the business to the other easily. And we had this thing called in, out, and across, meaning we're looking for communication coming into the business, communication going out of the business, and communication across the business. And understanding, listening and talking to a lot of people until I really understood how business came in, how communication went out to customers, suppliers, whatever, and who had to talk to who inside the business. And once I understood that, then my job was to look at putting together a communications package that facilitated that movement of information through that the throughput, if you would, of that business. And so I loved it because it was just talking to people. It was just listening to people. I would really spend time, on the ground floor with the people that were doing the work, because those were the people that were actually like the frontline people that were doing the talking. But I would also listen to the executives and understand what their constraints were, what their financial constraints were, what their business problems were, where they were trying to take the business in the future, so that I would understand that, so that I wouldn't give them something that would only serve them for a short period of time. I'm looking for, we're into the long game for them. And that taught me. And so when I came back to present the solution, it was a presentation. It wasn't a sales job. It was, here's what you told me. Here's what's going on in your business. Here's how it's working. Here's where the issues are. And here's how we can fix them. And they would nod their heads. They would nod their heads in agreement. And so for me, as a person who is, not that outgoing, I found that process of, putting together, understanding, putting together, and meeting needs, it was just a brilliant way of being able to serve the client. And I did not, people have all kinds of ideas about salespeople. Most of them are not positive, or many of them are not positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I guess you all know, because you're entrepreneurs, what it feels like to try to go in and sell somebody something, right? When you really, you've got this product, you understand it, you know it, and you feel like you've got to go in. I got to go in and convince people to buy this thing. My again, training and my learning from that was, one, people like to talk about their business. They like to talk about what they're doing. They really appreciate when you try to understand them, right? And then if you have something that's matching what they're doing, if you can show them, it's just, and at the end of the day, I felt really good about the encounters, and I made a lot of friends that way. I actually built relationships with a lot of my clients who, because I didn't feel like I was pushing a product. I was actually helping them. I was helping them with their business. I was helping them run their business better.
So I imagine you would have talked to quite a few people, even if there was one client, but that client has several people in the organization, right? And so you're listening to a lot of their issues, trying to hear their pain points. how do you remember? And let me ask the question fully, right? So you go into a company, let's say you talk to 10 people, right? They all have different problems. Maybe there's a theme that you see, but they all have different pain points. How do you remember those pain points, particularly when you're not going to be able to solve those pain points until months later, and you may have to recall that information? How did you remember all that information?
I took notes. I mean, I'm not a genius.
It's as simple as that.
And really and truly, right? Really and truly, I would sit down and can I take a few notes, right? Because I want to remember this. And honestly, that was it. So that you could go back through after you had all those interviews and sort of look for the patterns, look for the commonalities, look for the things that people had in, because there was a couple of things I learned about, business. One is there are a lot of similarities among businesses, particularly small business. Small business owners, entrepreneurs have a set of issues that are common across the board for the most part. Capitalization.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, right. Getting money, capitalization, lack of resources. And think about it, when you're a small business, if you have employees, you are dependent on the performance of a handful of people. So if one of them is not performing, or one of them is taken out of the lineup, then you have a big problem. If you're a major business, one person missing isn't a big deal. So they could have a serious issue from a turnover. And, how does that relate to communications? Well, people get frustrated, and frustration causes people to leave sometimes. And sometimes just trying to work on the phone, trying to be on the phone, and they've got people yelling at them, and, and your phone system isn't working all the time. You can't transfer it across. Believe it or not, those little tiny things added up. And so, so really kind of understanding that once I had spent enough time with enough small businesses, I could recognize that there were going to be some common things, and I could get those out of the way quickly. It's sort of like, let's talk about this. Is this an issue for you? Right. And so I didn't have to start from scratch every single time. And then after I sort of was able to get the common things out, then I really wanted to focus on what's unique about your business, because that's the thing about small business that's really important. And that is that you have some unique proposition about your business that sets you apart and allows you to compete. So I'm looking for, what is your competitive advantage? On what are you competing? What makes you different from the guy next door? Because I want to make sure that I am putting something in place that allows you to capitalize on your strength. Right. So I need to make sure that whatever it is that I'm giving you is going to add to your competitive strength, whatever that is. And that was the other thing that I think helped close the deal, is that when they could see that, one, I understood that, and two, that I was matching what I was doing to what it was that was most important to them, then it was much easier to close the sale. So
taking notes, listening, active listening, making sure you're hearing what the issues are, and then putting together the solution such that the client can't say no.
Right. Well, and the way that goes best is if you are providing a solution that addresses the most important thing. That's what you have to listen for, is what is most important to this business. What do they care about most? What are their care-abouts, right? And that was another word we used a lot. What are their care-abouts? Not yours, right? Never mind what you care about. Never mind how great whatever it is that you have. That's like background, right?
Right.
Right. This is a situation where what the client needs is way more important than what you have to offer. And I think that's where selling becomes difficult for people, is they're enthusiastic about what they're selling and not recognizing it doesn't matter to the person that's buying. What matters to the person that's buying is what they need.
Wait. There was a quotable. I got to get it. What the customer needs is way more important than what you're selling.
Absolutely.
Nykeia Neal, did you write that down? Because you write everything down.
I'm taking notes over here. I'm like,
you taking notes.
Me and my whole sales approach, because I think the solicitation of it is what makes it so difficult as a salesperson. Nobody likes to be solicited. It's not about anybody selling you anything, because we're sold all day, right?
Right.
But it's that solicitation that people don't want to feel like I'm being sold, like that you coerce me into something. No one wants to feel that way, even if they need it. It's like they don't want to feel that way. So yeah, Kev, no,
these are jewels. These are jewels.
Yeah. You want to connect with the person first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Remember, they're people, and you really want to spend time understanding what they're doing and what they're needing, and why what you have is going to be something that's going to be helpful to them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you need to be able to talk about that in a way that connects too. So yeah, that's what I would say. Because you're right. People are just bombarded with folks who want to sell them something.
Yep.
And they don't get enough time with people who care enough about what it is they're trying to do that they will listen to it and spend time with them listening.
Good stuff, Miss Coleman. Good stuff.
Okay. Yeah. All right. This is good. This is good, man. This is so Nykeia, I believe you're doing the same thing that I'm doing right now. As I'm hearing these things, I'm saying, how could I have done the things differently with my past customers, and how will I do things differently based on this conversation with my future customers? And that's really, really just that. I need to hear you. I need to hear you and really hear your issue.
Mm-hmm.
Your most important thing.
Because even I think that what you said, Ms. Coleman, makes so much sense, because right now, one of my business, is it niche or niche?
Niche, yeah. Either way, niche, yeah.
So I got to ask Kevin. Kevin's the wordsmith here all the time. By the way, you haven't dropped the word yet, Kev. So we got about 30 minutes left. I'm waiting to hear something.
When you have a Deborah Coleman on your podcast, you try to talk as minimally as possible, because when I tell you word command,
I hear it.
I hear it.
Let's after this, let me go pick up a dictionary and then get my kids on the couch. Let's get these dictionaries. We gotta
get these words together.
I know.
But as I was just sitting here thinking about my niche right now is to really help more small business owners with their personal finance stuff, because we put so much money, time, energy into our business that we don't think about, okay, at one point I want to retire. I need to make sure I have a personal budget. I'm saving and investing. And then even for what I really picked up on is not one business. Was it one business? What's that saying?
One size fits all. Yeah.
Yeah. Some businesses, although this business, it might be two businesses and they both need a financial plan or financial planning, let me say it that way, for their business, for their employees. Like they need to have maybe a 401k or a SEP or something like that, but it's not one size fits all, because this business is a little bit different. Maybe they have a higher turnaround rate or what have you. So just taking those notes, I was like, okay. And it builds, even if it's the same, even if I'm like, all right, I already know what you need, but if I'm sitting and I'm really listening what you're saying and you give me the opportunity to connect with your employees too, that shows a lot more value than the next person that can come in and do exactly what I can do in terms of the products that I can bring. But it makes that difference. So thank you for that, bringing that back to life. It's like listening to an audiobook right now, Kevin, taking notes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, you guys listen well. Yeah, that's That's the key. The key is it's a relationship. It's always a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And until you establish it, until you make a connection, until you understand them. And money, Nike, I will tell you, money is one of the most personal, intimate things ever. I'm sure you know this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people and their money have a personal relationship. They also have personal philosophies, I think, about money and what it means, right? Mm-hmm. So understanding what somebody's money means to them, I think is probably a key in the financial services industry. And I laugh because I feel badly for my financial advisors because I'm in the process of changing financial advisors now, and I feel really badly for them, right? Because I'm like, I got a new tax person, and I got a new financial manager that's, and when they have conversations with me, I know they have to take really deep breaths before they make the phone call, because it's like Mrs. Coleman's going to wear me out, right? She's going to wear me out because she is going to want to know every single thing about what it is that I'm planning to do with her money. And she's not going to let me get away with vague and fuzzy talk, right?
Which is something that you just read in the magazine that morning. That's not going to work.
No.
About my clients, the ones that I have, that my best clients are the ones that I have like the best relationships with.
Yes.
I know about their children. It just was like an easy, good rapport. And I noticed that I spent more time with those particular clients building that relationship. And now it's like, text messages is nothing, and Happy Mother's Day and just random messages. Like, when that happens, you like my homie now. Like, we're like,
yeah. And I know this may sound like it's impossible to do, but if you think of every single client as that person, that's the relationship you want to have, because the time you invest up front is going to pay, because they'll go on automatic. They'll go on automatic, and they'll refer you to everybody else. And so your business will grow from that initial investment in time in building the relationship, rather than trying to push your
instead of being transactional, because and not for nothing, you don't have to take on every client. I've learned that.
Right.
One of the clients that I know that was been transactional, it's like, I'm like, I don't like you. I was ready to get off this call. But you don't want to have that approach. I think long term and building with people that you want to be in business with makes more sense than just that transactional, like when you got to call them, like, not because they're going to challenge me, because I'm like, I don't even want to be on the phone with you. You're negative, or something like that. So
and so I think for small business owners, that's really hard to say, this is not a good customer for me.
It is.
But you do sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, Kevin, you were saying something. Sorry.
Yeah. So I want to turn the conversation to this is the life, your second life, so to speak, right? And there are a lot of people like you. So you leveraged your skills from corporate America into a company, and I'm going to let you talk about that company, because it's really important to note that your company is different from a lot of people, and a lot of the way other people run their companies, and there's a lot of push from society for you to run your company a certain way, and you've chosen not to do that. But what I want to introduce is, so a lot of people move from corporate America. They develop these skills. They have a financial backing, and they say, okay, I'm going to leave corporate America. I'm going to take my retirement money, and I'm going to start a company. And a lot of people have built multi-million, sometimes multi-billion-dollar companies from that launch pad, right? You left corporate America and you started a practice. Tell us why your practice is a practice and what that means. And why it's important to know the distinction for people who might be in this space but don't understand it.
Right. Thanks. So, one of the things I learned in working for corporate, a couple of things I learned about myself from working in the corporation. And one is that I'm not a great team player. I'm not, you know what I mean? And I know that about myself. I am really independent, and I am really, I'm really independent, and I like the challenge of figuring things out for myself. And so when I retired from the corporation again, I left in a pretty good, I left in with a really good base under me. So I had a pension, a fully vetted, vested, thank you, fully vested pension, which included medical coverage. So I sort of knew, and I had put my son through college. That was done. Those big fat bills, big fat tuition bills were paid off.
I'm sure he appreciated that.
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he does. And so I could look up and say, all right, now what do you want to do? So I had the luxury. I want to say that I had the luxury. I also knew from my corporate experience that one of the most difficult parts of my job every time I had it was managing people. And managing people was a make or break all the time. People people do things, right? They do things, right?
Because people will always be people.
People will be people, and they will do things at the most inopportune times, right? And so I thought, I don't know that I can, really, I'll tell you the truth. I left saying I never want to manage people again. I just never want to do that. So I came to my practice, and I'll tell you why that's that, from volunteering. And that's how I learned that I had a skill set that was not prevalent, and so was not prevalent in the nonprofit world, which is where I was doing my volunteer work. And it was desperately needed, even though they didn't know that they needed it at the time. So I thought about that, and I thought, I love consulting. This definitely calls for consulting with the skills that I have. In fact, I was doing it when I was volunteering. People were asking me how to do things in any way. So, and somebody came to me one day and said, what you do is way too valuable to be giving it away. You should be charging for this, and we will pay you. Right? And I think, oh, that's pretty good, right? And so literally that was the start of my practice. And then I had to get really clear about what was important. And this is what I would say to people. And there's such a thing as being a person who wants to do the work and somebody who wants to have a business, and those are not the same things. So I'm a consultant. I loved consulting. Developed the skills. I was good at it, and it was where I was comfortable in my skin. Had I turned that into a consulting business, it would have required me to bring on people who knew how to consult, or I'd have to teach them how to consult. I'd have to manage them. I'd have to go and get the business, and I'd have to apportion it out based on the skill set. And then I'd have all of the structure that would be required by law when you have employees, right? You've got W-2s, you've got health insurance, you've got withholding, you've got all of this other surround. And what I knew is if I did that, then I wasn't going to be able to do consulting. Because I will say this to people who are entrepreneurs. If you love doing the work that you do the work that you do, right? If you need to make money or want to make money with what you do, you are going to have to teach other people how to do it. And then you are going to have to set up a structure in which they can be managed, and they can be groomed to do it in a way that reflects what you want done. That is an entirely different set of skills. It is an entirely different approach. And fortunately, like I said, you have to think about this. Money was not the big driving force in my life, so I could choose to be and so how I thought about what I was doing when I sort of had the chance to think about it was I thought about lawyers, and I thought about lawyers operate in different ways. There are lawyers who are just practitioners. They're lawyers, right? And they have individual law firms, and they call it a practice.
Yep.
Doctors, there are doctors who have a practice. There are doctors that work for corporations too, right? But they're not the same as the doctors who are a practice. And that's when I decided that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a practice because I wanted to be practicing the skill set that I had. Because that was my value. That was my value proposition in the world, was I knew how to do something that was really, really necessary and welcome in the arena that I was moving into. So I focused as a practice. I chose it to do the work exclusively for nonprofit organizations. That was another, again, when you're a business person, you have to decide who your customers are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And while I could have been a consultant in business, one thing was there was a lot of competition for consulting, because anybody can be a consultant. Anybody can hang up a shingle and call themselves a consultant, right?
Right.
There are no rules about that, and there are no. You don't have to get any certifications.
Listen, so new consultant is a life coach. And
exactly.
That's no shade. If you have a life coach, do your thing. But that's the thing, right? There are not a lot of time requirements for learning to be a consultant, coach, so forth and so on. Right.
Unless you're serious about it. And that's what I want to say, right? I mean, there are people that call themselves coaches, call themselves consultants, who have no background for it.
Right.
Coaching, people who are coaching go to coaching school. So I went to coaching school when I left the corporation. Right. And coaching became part of my practice because my consulting was around business operations and helping nonprofits run their businesses. But the individuals, particularly the executives that were in charge of those businesses, also needed somebody to help them figure out how to be executives, literally how to be executives. And so I coached them and I did consulting in the business. Right. Yeah. But I combined the two because I had the training for both. I didn't just hang out a shingle and say, hey, I'm a business consultant, nor did I hang out a shingle and say I'm a coach. I went to coaching school and I had a coach and I practiced, and I joined the International Coaching Federation, which has requirements for you, right? You have to have so many hours of instruction and so many hours of practice and so many paid customers to be a member of the International Coaching Federation. So, I'm putting that out there. Those of you who are businesses and those of you who are hiring people, I think it behooves you to see if the people that you want to bring on have the background, the skills, and have a way of being able to say to you, this is how you know that I can do what I said I can do. This is how you know, right? Because I have this. This is all on my resume. You can see it. And because of that, because it was clear, my practice just grew like organically, right? I hardly ever had to look for customers. I never had a website. I'm going to tell you, everybody, you're talking about the pressure, right? Everybody told me like, oh, you got to go get a website. And I thought about it and I thought, no, I'm not going to do a website. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to be a word of mouth practice. The way that I'm going to get clients is I'm going to do such a good job for the client that I'm working with today that they are going to go tell somebody else that if you need somebody to be a consultant to help you figure out how to stretch your resources and make your nonprofit run better, she is the person you have to go to. If you need a strategy for your business, she is the person because she knows this better than anybody else. And I wanted that to be the way people found out about me. Partly because the nonprofit industry is a word of mouth industry. That's how you get hired there, is you get hired on referrals in that industry. And so I figured a website was going to be a waste of time and a waste of money. And it turned out that was true.
Why did you choose nonprofits though? What made you want to choose that particular area?
Good question. I chose because when I left the corporation, I spent some time, like I said, doing volunteer work. And I could see where they were working really, really hard and not getting anywhere. And I could see why. I could see that there were very few measurements in place. Like they really didn't have a way of knowing whether they were on mission or off mission, if they were, making progress with their client base or not. Because in business, everything is measured. Everything that is important in a business has some kind of measurement to tell you how you're doing. But that wasn't true in the nonprofit sector. And because of that, they were spending a lot of money and not knowing whether they were getting any results for that money or not. In fact, I could see that they weren't. I could see that money was like a sieve, right? Like money was going in and it was just coming out the bottom. And people could sometimes tell themselves, they had these stories that they told themselves about what good they were doing. But if you actually looked at who got helped and and I would ask the question is, how do you know that the people that you're helping are better, right? How do you know their lives are better? And they would give me a blank stare because they didn't have a way to measure that. And sometimes they would tell me it couldn't be measured. And I would say to them, everything can be measured. Everything can be measured. You know what I mean? And so that's why because one, the need was the greatest in the nonprofit sector, and I could see that. And it kept me out of the competition with the other people who were consulting with businesses. Because that was kind of a fierce, like I said, anybody could hang a shingle and call themselves a business consultant. And the field was just really crowded.
Right.
And
go
ahead.
So staying with the nonprofits, do you find, do you work, what's the scale in which you work with? Because I find a lot of people I run into say, well, yeah, my goals and aspirations is to open up a nonprofit for blah, blah, blah. A tendency, I feel like in our community, people think like, I'm just going to open up this nonprofit in some kind of way. The government is going to give me money to fund this business. And it's just going to be boom, easy street. I don't have to do anything. I'm going to, have a nonprofit in there. I'm going to get grants and everything's going to be great. So how does it play into what it is that you do when maybe you're working with some nonprofits?
Yeah. So when somebody comes to me, this is the phrase I hear often. I want to start my own nonprofit. And when somebody starts a sentence like that with me, my answer is no, don't do it.
Talk, real talk. Don't do it.
Pause.
Do it. Go and find out who else is serving this population that you want to serve. Find out what they're doing and find out whether there's a need for you. And the other thing I want to say is nobody's going to give you money for a nonprofit until you have been operating for 3 years. So this idea that there's free money out there and grants to be had for nonprofits is a myth. It's just a myth. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. You have to have a structure. You have to have a track record. You have to have some kind of fundraising apparatus in place. You have to have a track record of having actually been able to raise funds on your own before anybody will even think about giving you a dime for a nonprofit. And so this idea, Nykeia, I can imagine, right? This idea, I hear it, and I just, people can see my demeanor change when they come to me with that. And the idea, I think that people who are not comfortable with the idea of starting a for-profit business think that, I can be the CEO. And sometimes I'm going to tell you the truth. I think it's because people don't want to go get a job. I think
that's real talk though. Like that's what this show is about.
That's what I think. I think that especially when they say I want to start my own nonprofit, because do you know that the executive director or CEO of a nonprofit doesn't own the nonprofit? The board does, and the board can fire them. So you can start a nonprofit and your board of directors can fire you, right? And so how is that your own, right? A nonprofit belongs in the public domain. That's what a 501c3 classification is, which is what you have to have. That means you don't own anything and you can't make any money. I mean, you could take a salary, but if the salary that you're giving yourself is more than the impact of the money that you're using to solve whatever problem you're in business for, then you are going to be called on the carpet, right? The IRS is going to come after you, or eventually, I mean, there's this thing called GuideStar that rates nonprofits, and anybody who wants to give money to a nonprofit should check them out.
Okay.
And so you will get blasted in that, and what'll happen once that happens is nobody will give you money. So,
in the shade room.
Yeah, I'm saying, listen, go get a job, or go to work for another nonprofit that's doing what you're doing, and learn what you need to learn about what it takes to keep a nonprofit up and running. It is the hardest job ever. It's easier to be a for-profit business person than it is to be a nonprofit, I think, a nonprofit executive. Because it's just so, I mean, you're at the mercy of so many different forces when you are the executive director or CEO of even when you started.
Yeah.
So just tell them no, Nykeia, when they say that, like, bad idea, don't do that.
Yeah. I had a friend who started a school and eventually ended up getting voted out.
Yeah.
Started it and, started it with not having an understanding of how all those things work to even know that you could get voted out. And that put a bad taste in their mouth as it relates to business now. And I'm like, that was that particular business, the way you start. That's not,
right.
How it works everywhere,
Right. But you got to know that going in, you got to know a nonprofit is not, it's not just I'm just going to go do this. I care about cats, and so I'm going to start a nonprofit to save the cats. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So you have a rich and illustrious career. You have an extremely enriched entrepreneurial practice, definite. And so can you give us three quick points that you would tell people before they leave corporate America to start a practice, a business, or any entrepreneurial endeavor? Can you think of three quick things?
Yes. So I think you've heard me say this. I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm an opportunist. And so my life has been guided by this combination of capitalizing on opportunity when it came my way, whether it was for an education or for a job or whatever. When AT&T was moving me around, I never said no to the assignments that they gave me because they were going to teach me something. So I'm an opportunist. And I, even in my, when I left the corporation to move into whatever the next thing was going to be, it was a response to opportunity that put me in the path of having this very lucrative consulting practice. It wasn't that I went out to say I'm going to start a consulting practice. But what I will tell you is I did the homework. I mean, the opportunity was there, but I also did the work of sort of sorting out, okay, here's an opportunity for me to make money. Somebody has said, you know what, we want to pay you for what you're doing, and other people should pay you. So that's the opportunity. The work was in figuring out what structure was going to be the right structure for me to work, for me to realize that opportunity. And so my first thing is recognize what you want. You know what I mean? Recognize if you need to make a lot of money, then you're going to have to put up, you can't do it by yourself. You will not be able to, because you only have so much capacity. There are only so many hours in the day. If you're going to do the work, then you are not going to be able to scale your organization, your business. You've got to build. So start with what you want. Do you want to do the work, or do you want to build a structure that will provide a significant income? And if you don't have any income coming in, then you may want to start with I need to get something to get at least an income base. I may have to have a job. I hate to say this, I may have to have a job to give me an income base so that I can build a business. It takes a long time to build a business.
Yeah.
So that, I guess, was that 3 things, Kevin? That was one.
That was one with A, B, and C.
Okay.
Yeah. Which serves the purpose.
All right.
But that's a poignant point. So if I heard you correctly, and now I'm active listening more, right? You're saying know yourself and know what you want. If money is your goal, then you're going to have to build a system that's going to have to include personnel, because you can't do it by yourself. If your desire is to be independent and doing the work, and you enjoy doing the work, then a practice may be what you're looking for,
right?
Not a business.
Right. And even then, I know we're running a little over. Even then, I didn't do it alone. When I needed expertise that I didn't have, I hired independent contractors. Sure. I hired other consultants who had their own businesses, so I didn't have to put them on payroll. And so that's another way. I mean, it's not like to say that you can't get additional capacity, but you've got to realize the business structure matters and deciding what structure works for you. So that's how I dealt with my capacity issue. Was I had a network of other consultants that did work that I didn't do. And I would take on a project and then I would subcontract to them.
Listen, we could talk for hours and hours, because your experience, your wealth of experience, your wealth of knowledge is immeasurable. And so thank you. Nice. What you got?
Yeah, you're not gonna ask about a book.
So I'm gonna do our fast forward with you real quick, right? And here, because I know you the way that I know you, I know this first question is going to be a challenging one for you. But fast forward, I want you to just answer as quickly as possible. A book that has had a great impact on your personal or professional life.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Right.
So many. I think I would guess I would say Built to Last. Built to Last, and I can't remember who the author is. Forgive me.
We'll find it.
Look it up. Okay. That's a book that was really, really important. And there was a book I have to give you. I have to come back to you on one that I read about consulting, because I can't really think of the name of that. But Built to Last is really a good book on, how you get a company sustainable. And I think that's really important for an entrepreneur.
Built to Last. All right, good deal. A tool or resource that has been helpful, extremely helpful in your professional life.
The internet.
Didn't AT&T invent the internet? No, that's
yeah. Well, no. Well, sort of. Yes. Sort of. Yes. Behind this, they put the infrastructure in for it. So.
That's right.
Yeah. So yes,
right.
But as a consultant, being able to find sources of information, that has been one of the biggest, helpful things. Because you can't know everything, but I believe I can find out anything I want to know now easily. So that's been it.
Cool. One of the biggest challenges you had in your professional career?
I think the biggest challenge for me has been sort of understanding personnel, people. The biggest challenge ever for me, whether it was in the consulting practice, was always about really understanding what people need to do and how you need to be to bring the best out in people, so you can get what you need done when you do need people.
That's good.
Cool.
Yeah.
One thing you wish you'd learned earlier in life that would have helped you in your later life, personal and or professional?
I wish I had learned earlier that that life will go on. And what I mean by that is, the mistakes that you think are fatal, like in your growing up, most of the time they're not. And when you look at them in hindsight, you see that sometimes that they're little blips. And so the idea is, weather the storm won't last. It'll teach you something. And so move on. Got you. Well, Deborah Coleman. Did you find out who wrote Built to Last?
Jim Collins.
Yeah, that's it. Jim Collins. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Put it in my cart.
Okay. I'm also a big fan of Stephen Covey's. The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm a big fan of that.
I'm trying to type it into the chat. Let me put my glasses on. Let me stop playing with it.
There we go.
Let me stop playing around here. All right. So it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
Like I said, you have just been a wealth of knowledge. We've gotten an understanding, and I now know how to better approach my client base, listening, being consultative, not just relational, but consultative and relational. So I'm going to put that into practice today.
Yeah, and let me just say this one thing. Talk in questions. You've heard me say that before, Kevin.
Talk in questions.
Talk in questions.
Right?
Talk in questions. That's a way of really being able to get to understand people instead of being, making statements, right? When you're talking to somebody, think about talking in questions, asking them questions. You'll learn a lot by talking in questions. And can I say one thing? I know.
No, take it.
I want to say how much I admire that the generation that is coming behind me is so entrepreneurial. The corporate world was what it was. It was my opportunity at the time. And I realized that things have changed. And I am so encouraged by the fact that people have I just think it's really brave. I think that people have the courage to, chart their own path and carve their own way. Because I think there's power when you are in control of your means of production, right? That was one thing that the corporation didn't allow. And so I just want to say how much I admire the two of you and everybody else in your cohort that you all are associated with, that I have had the pleasure of meeting on your broadcast, on your podcast. I watch it. I watch it often. Yeah, I do. Because I learn things from the people that you're talking to, but mostly I'm just really, really amazed and proud of you all and what you're doing. So I want to say that. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Good job. Yeah, good job. Yeah.
It means the world. And we're going to work to be better. Every single podcast, we're going to work to get better.
All right. Well, you're doing a great job. So I love it.
Thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you to the audience for giving us your time, your ear, your attention. As you know, this is the Biz Breaks Podcast, where we have real talk with real entrepreneurs. We're here every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can catch us on all our social media platforms. Please make sure you go like, follow, share, and subscribe everywhere you see this podcast, on every platform. Like, follow, share, and subscribe. That's how we get more people, and that's how we get this information out to a greater audience. So we thank you for your time, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Biz Breaks Podcast.
All right. Bye, guys. Bye.